Thank you all. We have some time, I believe, what is it, 20 minutes, Bob? Patrick, excuse me, for some questions and interaction amongst the panelists, then we'll open it up to the whole group. A number of you and myself, all of us have talked about the examples of partnership and the importance of partnership, and all of those in service of improving results for kids, students. In your experience, what makes people good at partnership? We've talked about some of the system stuff. What about the human dimension? What helps people? What makes people good at partnering? What dispositions and skills bring people together to do this kind of work? Anybody want to start? Vivian. Yes.
Well, it's probably a very long list, but the ability to develop trusting relationships, and I'll speak about this maybe more from the research community side. The work of what it takes to develop trust, to do a really good job of listening and not being the expert. Those are not things that we as researchers are traditionally trained in. We are trained in lots of technical skills. But to really do this work in collaboration, I think those are a set of skills that can be learnable. And so we need to do a much better job actually of training researchers who are coming up through our fields to be able to do this trust building, the listening, and really taking in what practitioners' needs are and transforming them into research agendas so that we can help produce more useful knowledge.
Listening, openness to others. Some of you have been in contexts that have had a great deal of difficulties sometimes, as well as some breakthroughs in relationships. Erin, you wanted to jump in?
I think I would just add there, because being a union president and that piece side of it is very often I think that's looked at as that's going to be a contentious relationship, and that's not necessarily the case. But I think flexibility definitely has to be there. We are governed and manned by our contracts, but there are ways of thinking outside the box, and I think you have to be able to do that. And like Vivian said, that trust has to be there before that can occur, obviously. But I think you have to sort of look at what you have and what you can do with what you have, and try to come up with some innovative ways to get around that.
Let me push on that a little bit, Erin, because it's flexibility with partners, but what about how to build that kind of flexibility with members and other leaders within the union?
It's most important in all our work in Meriden. It's always the teacher voice is there, and that's always first. We must have it. We're not going to get anywhere if I don't have that from. And now that this partnership has been going on now for a few years, we do get a lot of examples, like I had said earlier, that teacher voice has now driven our innovations of recent. Our biggest one is probably we have a BYOD system, which people 3 years ago thought that's bring your own device. Thought that was a real crazy thing to even jump into, but it came from our teachers that we were just getting. This is such a technology era to tell these kids that they can't have their cell phones, they can't do this. They're going to have them. It's part of their life. It's going to be part of their life for the rest of their lives. And it was really a matter of our teachers coming forward and saying enough is enough. Let's allow it as long as we are part of how we allow it. And it's worked fine. We now have 5 of our schools that we provide one-on-one devices with because it's been so successful.
Anybody else want to jump in on that, Paul?
I'll build a little bit off of what both Vivian and Erin just said. I liked the term about the idea of flexibility. So what I'd like to add to that is that there's a commitment to the actual partnership. I mentioned when I was up there that these two, the practitioner and the researchers, operate in their kind of their own worlds, but what really is necessary to ensure kind of a successful partnership is that there's recognition that there's something beyond those two worlds. There's the commitment to this new world of partnerships. There's new languages that need to be developed, new ways of thinking, new tools of the trade, and flexibility is part of that very in order to do that, right, is to have that flexibility.
I would just add, it's really important to kind of do the work to build the values in a
Get
partnership.
the mic closer, Bob.
Do the work to build the common values in the partnership. Partnerships will always have disagreements. That's part and parcel of marriage, relationships, and partnerships. But I do think that if you have a value framework that you're using to think through how you're moving forward, and that value framework ultimately has to put the needs of students and then acknowledge the needs of adults, I think you can really move forward.
We've talked about some of the dispositions and skills that individuals bring to partnership. What supports are needed from outside or from others to help support and sustain the building of partnerships over time? Jeff, you have some thoughts on that?
Money.
Money, yeah.
But I mean, seriously, I think the work that we do at the settlement school, it's when you live in a rural area, when you live in an urban area, it's the time of getting people together, creating the time, creating the structure for that time, and it's hard to bring people together. And I was going to say, persistence on an individual trait is another one that I think you need, just to bring people together. So I think the support you need is the support to create time to meet and time to get together. Collaboration takes a lot of time, and so you need more time, and so you need the support for that time.
And I would add time
Erin,
is
then Vivian.
definitely the most important thing. That was what we put in first in our district. We knew that we had to have a set amount of time looking again at that contract about what the contract, some of that language, and any contract, very old things in there, and trying to reorganize that time and use it for our teachers to have that time. And that was essential. Because the other piece, money, is what we don't have. And our district has been flat funded for 6 years by our city. And so money is a huge factor as far as that goes as well. But the time has to be there, because if you're asking teachers to work together, that time has to be put in place.
I think what both of these comments are pointing to is that this is resource-intensive work. So it's fine, talk about partnership, but it takes staffing, right? It takes core operating support to nurture just the relationship building and the relationship maintenance, the ability for people to come back together again when disagreements occur, when expectations have failed to be met. And I say this, as a foundation, we've talked a lot about the need not just to support projects, project by project funding is sometimes easier to come by, but to really spend the thinking about how to support the core operations of the partnership. And if that isn't there, then projects can often pull people away from the long-term joint agenda.
That really gets to what other levels of the system could do. You're talking about projects that get forced on schools or whatever. What can different levels of the system do to support partnership? Districts for schools, or regional offices for districts, or states for districts? And ultimately, I want to get to what the new federal legislation may mean for all of this, but what about different levels? Paula?
Yeah, so that's actually the primary intention of NERP, right, is to actually support these partnerships. So I just very recently had a conversation with a researcher that was interested in having a partnership with a local school district, and he was like, well, I don't know, we've tried it, I'm not sure that it really works, and there's difficulties, right? As soon as I mentioned, this is not actually anything new. I've heard this from several partnerships that are currently in existence. They face those same challenges. You could feel this sense of, relief, like, okay, this is not just us. Like, this is not just a local, no, it's like there's commonalities across the partnerships. And so NERP is going to try to be one of those infrastructures that can help support these conversations happen, so that people don't feel like they're in isolation, that their problems are unique, that there's actually others that have felt that and have found solutions to those actual problems.
I think that one of the important things, money is necessary to make the transition to partnership, but partnership has to be endemic in the work, right? So at the school level, teachers have to realize they need to partner as departments and teams and work together to kind of think through these issues. And I think it's old school to think that you can close your door and not have any relationship with other teachers in the building. And similarly, I think at the district level, you have to constantly be engaging in teachers and their representatives to talk about where you're going, what you're thinking about. Because if you don't make partnership part of the work, it'll always be an add-on, and we'll never get to the place where we want to be to transform outcomes.
What about one of the things around interest-based bargaining is often the importance of having some training, or more importantly, even direct facilitation. In brokering these different relationships between people that often aren't in relationship or have had bad experiences together, do you see a role for some kind of facilitation or a third party, like NERP is trying to be that third party? What role do you see for any of that, or do you? In some ways, AFT's been a huge third party to help facilitate the work in Meriden. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. AFT has and still continues to be a huge part of our professional development, our collaboration as far as in Meriden goes. We also just recently belong to a RISE network, which reminds me very much of NERP, where that is bringing in 4 districts. I believe we just picked up Hartford as well in Connecticut, and that gives us a time, as you said, that we can talk with other districts, because you can say, well, how did you do that? Like, all right, your teachers meet every hour on a Thursday. Well, how did you do that? And what did you do to reduce your attendance? Because in the state of Connecticut, we all fall into alliance districts, our lowest performing schools. And we have to answer to the state, and very often those types of things you answer to the state that another district might have the answer for you. So I think NERP is very much like the RISE network, in which Meriden is, and of course our continuing relationship with AFT.
Jeff?
Yeah, we actually, in the book we're writing, we tackle third-party facilitation in a chapter, and you don't, from our perspective, you don't need third-party facilitation to succeed, but it depends on your context. I think if you have a history of contentious relationships, it might help to have that third party come in and help. We've seen examples in Springfield, Massachusetts, for example, and CEC. I know that LaGrange benefited tremendously from your facilitation. So it might be that just that extra boost that it needs to catalyze the relationship, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary.
Right. Well, let's talk about ESSA for a moment, and what opportunities or challenges or what that might provide for moving the work of partnership forward. Randy talked at the beginning of the morning about the shift in paradigms. How do you see this shifting paradigm from No Child Left Behind to ESSA as providing support or challenges to moving the work of partnership that we've all been talking about with all kinds of different players within schools, with districts, among districts, with communities? Where does ESSA help, support, or hurt? Vivian, sure.
Sure. In the realm of thinking about the role of research evidence, I think that we have had very much a top-down sort of influence, where at times it has felt like the evidence movement is something that is being forced down upon schools and teachers in schools have not really been part of defining the evidence agenda in terms of what it means and what it means to use evidence. So I think in that sense, ESSA is a bit of a lifting of the pressure cooker. Now, that creates opportunities. It also creates a lot of challenges. And one of the big sets of challenges is the lack of research capacity at the state and local level. So there are still over 80 mentions of evidence and evidence-based in ESSA. So there's certainly an encouragement and sometimes more of a requirement around using evidence, but figuring out how to do that, it's going to take a lot of capacity. And I've seen estimates that something like 21 states don't have research offices. A lot of times research staff and research offices were the first things that went during the recession. And so here again, though, I think that research practice partnerships and local universities, if they choose to step up, can help provide some of that capacity for practitioners, for policymakers to figure out what does the existing evidence base say, how and to what extent is it useful for our local decisions, and in the cases where the evidence base is lacking, how can we generate new research evidence together that's more meaningful and useful?
Other thoughts on the new environment that may be opening up here?
I have a lot to learn. I've been living in New York, so.
Anybody else?
I mean, I just agree with what Vivian said. in thinking of what I would add to the conversation, Vivian did an excellent job. So I'll just say, quote unquote, Vivian.
Yeah, and I do like how she,
Yeah.
relaxed the pressure cooker. I think that's probably sums it up. When you went from No Child Left Behind and now you're into the ESSA move at this point, there's still a lot of unknown because it shifted to the state level, and that's still an undecided factor. In Connecticut, I sit on the State Board of Education in Connecticut, so that's another hat I wear, and that certainly is a huge factor up at the state level as well, waiting to what the districts will be required.
This relaxing of pressure, how worried do we need to be the relaxing of pressure will just let people kind of ease back and go back to doing what we've always been doing? How do we instill the urgency through partnerships to take advantage of this window? Any thoughts on that?
I think the urgency is still there. I think it's very much there. I think of it as a teacher, as a teacher in the state of Connecticut, going through a new evaluation system, wondering what ESSA will be, going through Common Core, going a new SBAC test. That all happened in a matter of a 3-year period, and I think like a lot of teachers just connected them all, and some of them are not connected at all. And so I think just taking one off for a while, not that teacher evaluation is not certainly up there as far as an issue that will be addressed. I'm always feeling relaxed. In our city, it's very important, but it's not something that is like number one that we're like, all right, what are we going to do now? Our concentrate is more on teaching and learning and the student and our student growth, and that will come. So I don't think it will go back to same old way, not at all, because everything else has changed so much as we went through that shift.
Okay.
Can I?
Vivian, sure.
So, since we're here with the Albert Shanker Institute, one of the principles of organizing is you organize where you are and the people that you work with. And so here's my plea to researchers. I think this ESSA creates an opportunity for us, and I hope that we will claim the responsibility and do more of what we need to do to make research more useful and to help provide the capacity for research where it's lacking. I mean, I think, could be a call to action for researchers where, we get past this period where we've been on the outside kind of yelling at how terrible everything's going, and we can become more a part of the solution.
Great, thank you. Let's open it up. Other questions, comments from anybody? Patrick? Are you asking a question? Good. I thought you were the timekeeper.
I thought he was just looking for something.
Pat.
As an educator, one of the problems that I've had with research and researchers is that there's a tremendous problem with the novelty factor in education, where you do anything different in the classroom and scores go up because it's different. The problem that I've had is that there's rarely any follow-up study to see if it's actually working, and how do you deal with the professional development aspects to make sure that the teachers are implementing the research correctly?
Anybody want to take a crack at that?
Yeah. I think your point is so well taken, and that's why both Paula and I are such big fans of partnerships, why we are on this soapbox, because the idea of a partnership is that researchers and practitioners are in it together. It's not about one study, because one study is never going to say this is exactly what should be done and then game over, right? So it's about, we learn something, folks try it out, we see how it worked. In many cases, it kind of works in some ways and not others, or it's disappointing, whatever it is. But that leads to the next set of research questions. And this idea of learning as we go together, that is a fundamental part of partnerships, we hope is going to help address that problem.
One thing I might just add is I do think that RCTs and research are really important going forward in the education agenda. But again, I think some of the work of the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching on really empowering frontline staff to think about improvement science and working and valuing those activities as much as the research is crucial. We know that teachers know a lot. We know that they're kind of struggling to improve. So one of the things we have done in New York is to really try to create a framework for continuous improvement that's real and grounded in student data, role function clarity, and a commitment to higher standards. And by doing that, I think we're going to learn a lot with researchers to solve the problems we face.
Good. Other questions, comments? Yes.
Yeah, the mention of action science leads me back to Vivian's picture of the bridge, where all the research is on one side and all the practice is on the other. And I was wondering, you had a list on, and I couldn't quite figure out which one it was, the capacity building side, but where is the role of practitioner action research and things like that in your vision of a partnership?
So I think there's room for lots of different kinds of partnerships. And I think we see that. Chicago Consortium, very long-standing partnership where there are more distinct roles that are played between researchers and practitioners. Even though there's a jointly designed agenda, the researchers go off and do the work, and then there's some shared interpretation of the findings. In the kind of improvement science work that Bob was just describing, it's more rooted in the practitioners themselves, doing the research, looking at the results and making changes. And researchers are more, I would say, sometimes like content experts in particular areas that kind of help come in and inform and facilitate part of that process. But it's much more rooted on the practitioner side. I think there's room for all of this. There are also more design research partnerships where it's almost researchers and practitioners co-design, co-construct. It's a much more intermeshed kind of situation. And just as I think many places are different, contexts are different, the players involved are different, there's not necessarily one right way of doing the partnership. But I think in the work that NERP is doing, we can still learn across these partnerships. What is it that this kind of partnership is doing well that others could learn from? We're seeing more and more blended types of partnerships where they do some projects that are maybe more improvement science, some are more researchers doing the analysis. And so there's room for this, I think.
Yes. Yes, I should bring the mic to you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm from the Institute for Education Sciences, and I just wanted to say that we have been funding partnerships, researcher-practitioner partnerships for the last few years, and some of them have been really successful. And I wanted to just say one example is Boston Public Schools and the Extended Learning Time project they're doing with the American Institutes for Research. What they did is they set out a partnership agreement, which is a living working document, where they came together and decided what the roles would be, what their common agreements were, things like, that the researchers wouldn't share the data before it was reviewed by the district and things like that. So that document has been really important for moving them forward, and they keep reviewing it and adding to it and tweaking things as they go along. But it makes both sides feel like they have an investment in the partnership.
Good, thank you.
That echoes the earlier comment that I was saying about this recognition that the partnership work is now beyond just both sides, right? There's now a commitment to this third kind of thing. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Shall we move to lunch? I want to thank the panel.